So I think I'm gonna repaint this thing and make it look a little bit better. For one, because I'm trying to sell it, but for two, it just needs to look better than it does now. Well, that's right. We're gonna be doing a restoration here on the 1976 Sears SS18. This will be my first time doing a full quote-unquote restoration. The plan for the tractor is to make it the kind of daily driver, mower, that type of machine, something that's going to be reliable, good shape, obviously, mechanically in good shape, and that sort of thing. So basically what we're doing here is we're just starting to strip down the tractor. This is the first afternoon that I had to work on it. So as you can see, we're just kind of disassembling things and that sort of thing. Start to finish, it takes about 40 minutes or so to pull an engine on one of these if you're starting with a complete nose and all that. You saw before there we had to pull the weights and chains off of it because it was still set up for winter mode. For better or for worse, I only got a chance to snowblow with this thing once, and it was kind of cool. We got to see that it worked, and then after that, kind of just park it, and thankfully we didn't have to worry about a ton of snow this past winter. But like I said, we're just going to be going through and going to paint this thing and rewire it, replace the fuel line and things like that, do a valve adjustment on it, and just things to kind of make it more turnkey and ready to go and that sort of thing. So we're going to start with prepping the fenders. This is the first real full day that I had available to work on the machine. This was a Saturday, so we got up nice and early, and unfortunately we did have to wait a little bit for the weather to warm up to a suitable temperature for painting. But we're just going at it with the old Milwaukee cordless grinder with a wire wheel. As you can see, I took the outside of the fender down to bare metal. The inside, I just kind of scuffed it. The undersides of the fenders is something that you don't really ever see, not something really to worry about. So just kind of scuffed it a little bit more lightly and painted it with the Exo Rust Caterpillar Yellow, which is not the color that I'll be painting the tractor, but again, just a way to paint something that you don't really see. So I'm doing the same thing here with the side clutch cover, and taking the outside down to bare metal and just kind of scuffing the inside, and repeating that here with the PTO cover. So for paint, for the stuff that matters, we're going to be using all Napa paint, which is like a Martin Senauer, I think is the name of the company who makes it. So we're just using some self-etching primer here. As you can see, I made kind of a homemade painting area using one of my aluminum tractor ramps in between two recycling cans. And this worked pretty good because it allowed me to obviously hang the small parts, but also gave me a pretty big area to work with on some of the bigger parts like the fenders, the hood, and that sort of thing. So for the first time, we're going to see some color sprayed on here. This is a Napa aerosol, and the paint mixture is a Caterpillar color. It's called New Honey Yellow. I tried some of the generic Caterpillar equipment yellows that you can get at, Tractor Supply and the hardware store and that sort of thing, and didn't really have luck with them in terms of getting a color that I was satisfied with. So I went to my local Napa who mixes paint and picked through their book of paint chips, and this is what I came up with. So I think this is pretty close to the old Valspar paint that used to be available, which was called Old Cat Yellow at the time. This is a bit lighter than some of the factory Sears tractors that are still out there, and I think part of that has to do with just how the paint reacts to 40 years of sunlight and ultraviolet light and that sort of thing, because if you look in the sales brochures, they are a little bit lighter in appearance than what they seem to be nowadays. But it was a color that I was happy with, and it was cool to get a couple coats on here and see how it all took shape. For the most part, this restoration is pretty cut and dry. Take it apart, repaint it, rewire it, put it back together. One thing that I'm doing that's a little bit abnormal is we're going to be splicing a couple different tractor frames together. So you'll see in a minute what we're using, but we're going to get started by splitting the frame on the SS18 and taking everything apart to do that. So there, we got it split, and I'm just going to pull the front half of the frame aside. That's the half that we're going to be using, and going to go put the rear half outside and get to work prepping the other machine. So as I'm finishing up getting color on the fenders here, if you pay close attention in the background, you'll see another partially complete chassis. And that is a 1973 or so ST12. I think that's originally what it was, and picked that up from Stephen Taylor over in Rhode Island. And as you can see, we're getting to work here, doing a lot of the same things as I was just doing a moment ago to the SS18 frame. And obviously that means we're going to be splitting it. So this tractor I purchased basically because it had a good fiberglass dash and a good rear end. And not that there was really anything wrong with the rear end in the SS18. I think it just had a lot of miles on it. The gears ground when you shifted, and the pulley wobbled quite a bit on the input shaft. And I also didn't like the plastic dash that tractor had. So this was a good deal, and kind of right place, right time sort of thing. And basically what you'll see here is once we split the ST12, we're going to get ready to prep it so that we can put it together with the front frame half original to the SS18. And that way we can once again have a complete frame, but with a healthier transmission and a better fiberglass dash. I did attempt to separate the steering wheel and the steering shaft from the tractor, and gave up on it pretty quickly. It just, wasn't a fight that I was really interested in fighting. So I took all the dash bolts off and slid it up on the steering column. And if you look closely, you'll see a hose clamp there, which I put in place to keep the dash from falling down as I was working on wire wheeling it. as you can see, the frame takes quite a bit of time to prep, and basically I just wanted to get it to the point where I was happy with it. And so then put some primer on it. Again, this was Napa self-etching primer, and I really like this stuff. It's kind of expensive. It's like $9 or $10 a can, but shop local, especially with everything that's going on right now. So put that on, went back over to some of my smaller engine parts and put some more color on them. And most of the color parts wound up having about, I don't know, I'd say 4 or 5 coats when it was all said and done. And again, you know, that paint is expensive as well, but it's one of those things where I'm doing this to do it right. It's my first time doing it. Don't really want to cut corners and have a half-assed tractor when it's all done. So I figured it was worth the time to do it right, even if it meant using more materials. So pretty sure this was the last coat on those pieces, so kind of doing a heavier final coat, making sure there's no light areas in the paint, that sort of thing, and we can move on from there. So another first for me on this project was doing anything more than carburetor work on an Onan. I know a lot of people complain that they're kind of fickle, but for me they've been pretty good over the years, and for the most part really haven't had to do much more than carburetor work. Done some ignition work, and I did have to reseal the oil pan on my previous SS16, which was not planned. Had to do that in the middle of a snowstorm. That was a lot of fun. So anyway, with this engine, it's a BG MS, which is the 49.8 cubic inch with an oil filter, commonly regarded as one of the better Onans. And when I originally bought this tractor, the guy told me that it had compression problems and it didn't run very well and that sort of thing. And got it home and compression tested it. Had 75 on the front cylinder, 80 on the rear, which is technically within spec, but it's on the low end. Spec is like 75 to 125. And obviously I got to keep in mind that this is a 40-year-old engine. Can't expect too much of it. But I figured, you know, again, we're here, let's do the right thing. So as you can see, I've pulled the heads off of it. James, if you're watching this, I'd like you to know that there's 9 bolts per cylinder head. And just got to work decarboning them. So you can see combination of brake cleaner, paper towels, and like a wire brush, and we were able to get them cleaned up pretty good. And this is the first time I had heads off an Onan, so it was kind of neat to see the inside of one of them. The cylinders both looked real good, no pitting or scoring or anything like that. And ideally, something like this, I would resurface the heads, even something as simple as putting some sandpaper on like a table saw or something like that. But I didn't have a surface that was flat enough to my liking, so instead I just kind of, you know, wire brushed them a bit, went over them with a razor blade to make sure that there was no residue from the old gaskets or anything like that, and then got to work reassembling. So all this work to the engine was done in hopes of breathing a little bit of life into it and maybe regaining some compression. And, you know, compression, as far as I'm concerned, it's kind of just a number. You know, whether the engine runs or not is more important, and obviously the compression can be kind of telling of that. And in the case of this engine, you know, it always started well, it always ran good, always had good power, smoked a bit, and you know, it would knock a little bit when it was cold until it warmed up anyway. So part of what we're doing here, I'm doing a valve adjustment, which was another first for me, which was kind of cool to get to learn how to do this. So the valves on this engine were pretty tight. They were tighter than spec all across the board. And if I remember correctly, I did 8 thou on the intake and 13, I think, on the exhaust. They were like 4 and 6 on both sides. So hopefully a proper valve adjustment mixed with the decarboning of the cylinder heads can regain us a little bit of compression and maybe help freshen the engine up a little bit. So day 3. So far we're about a day and a half into this, and as you can see, I'm just prepping the middle frame section, which you could also refer to as the dash tower, for paint. This is the part that we're going to have to retain from the SS18 just due to the clutch and the clutch not really being functional from the ST12. So as you can see, we're prepping everything with the wire wheel. Spent a lot of time with the wire wheel on this project, and again, what we're going to do here is do a real nice job on the outside, kind of scuff the inside, and we're going to use off-brand generic paint on the inside, and we're going to use the good stuff on the outside. So here we're using the XO Rust on the outside, and it's funny how these different colors of yellow react on camera and in different light. On camera, the XO stuff looks real close. In person, I don't think it does. It definitely is closer to the color that I'm using versus some of the other colors that are out there, but still a little bit too bright, a little too orangey for my taste, but it works. And unfortunately, this was the part of the project where my phone had run out of memory and from taking all these time lapses and videos, and it hadn't yet occurred to me that I could finagle my work phone into the tripod. So I took some pictures. So here you can see we're getting the frame ready. Got the steering wheel masked off, got the dash primed, and we're starting to put the frame together for painting the frame yellow. In the background there you can see the kind of sad remains of the SS18 rear frame, but the show has to go on. James is going to wind up with those parts, and I'm sure that'll be in a complete running tractor again soon. And now we're getting some color on the frame. This is the biggest single chunk of yellow that you see on the machine, and the fenders came out real good, so it was important to me to make sure that this came out good as well. So making sure that we're hitting all the spots, doing several light coats, a couple medium coats in the middle there, and eventually this will get clear coated as well, just to give it a real nice shimmer and shine. And after 2.5 days of working, we'll bring this thing inside and let it set up overnight, let the paint start to cure. So that's it for part 1. Stay tuned for updates as we finish the restoration on the 1976 Sears SS18. Thanks for watching.